3 bone-chilling true hotel room horror stories. A hotel room is a strange kind of place, isn't it? It's an intimate space that's also completely anonymous. You're sleeping in a bed where hundreds, maybe even thousands, of strangers have been before you. You shower, touch doorknobs, and walk on a carpet that holds the memories of countless other lives. For most of us, it's just a temporary stop, a forgettable part of a journey. But for some people, a hotel room becomes the backdrop for a story they can never, ever forget. A place where that anonymity gives way to something deeply and personally horrifying. Tonight, we have a couple of stories that have become the stuff of internet legend, and one that's a documented, unsolved mystery. These stories get to the heart of what's so unsettling about a locked hotel door, the terrifying reality of what can, and sometimes does, happen behind it. If you enjoy exploring the darker side of our world, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Now, let's get into it. Section 1, The Crime Scene Room. This first story is an account that's been shared and reshared online for years, becoming a modern urban legend. It comes from a business traveler, a guy who basically lived on the road. For him, hotels weren't just a place to stay. They were a predictable, familiar part of his routine. But one night, that all changed. His flight was delayed for hours, and by the time he finally got to the small city where his conference was, it was way past midnight. He was exhausted, cranky, and just wanted to crash. He gets to the check-in desk of the mid-range hotel he'd booked, and the night auditor gives him that look we all dread. The hotel was overbooked. His room was gone. The traveler argued, but it was useless. There wasn't another vacant room in the entire town. Seeing how desperate he was, the manager on duty pulled him aside and made a weird offer. He said they had one room, but it was technically unavailable. It was supposedly under construction and not in their system. But if the traveler was okay with it, they'd let him have it for the night, completely off the books and free of charge. The manager was acting cagey, but the traveler was just too tired to question it. A free room is a free room. He said yes. The room was on the 3rd floor, tucked away at the very end of a long, dim hallway. The first thing that hit him was the smell, that sharp chemical odor of fresh paint, so strong it made his eyes water. He opened the door, and the smell was even worse inside. The room was practically empty. Just a bed, a small table, and a TV. No art on the walls, no notepad, no Bible in the drawer. Then he saw it. The walls and even the ceiling were covered in a sloppy, single coat of white primer. It was so fresh, it was still tacky, but he could see something underneath. Darker, rust-colored stains were bleeding through the paint. There were blotches and patterns that looked disturbingly like splatters. He followed them with his eyes, and a story of pure violence started to take shape on the walls around him. His eyes dropped to the floor. Most of the dark, industrial carpet was covered with clear plastic sheeting, taped down at the edges. When he peered closer, he could see the carpet underneath was soaked with a deep, dark stain, so dark it was almost black. His blood ran cold. This wasn't a room being renovated. It was a crime scene being covered up. He started noticing more things. Fist-sized holes in the drywall had been crudely patched with spackle, but not even sanded yet. He could piece it all together. The attack starting near the door, the splatters hitting the ceiling, the struggle across the room, and the final, awful collapse right where the plastic now covered the floor. He was standing in a room where someone had been brutally attacked, maybe even killed, just hours or days before. And the hotel, desperate to not lose a single night's revenue, just slapped a coat of paint over it. He backed out of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't sleep a wink that night. He spent the next few hours huddled in a lobby armchair, just staring at the front door, waiting for the sun to come up. He never found out what really happened in there, But the image of those painted over walls and the dark stains hiding under plastic was burned into his mind forever. Section 2. The decomposing Ed in the closet. Housekeepers see us at our most vulnerable. They clean up the messes we leave behind, and they are the silent witnesses to the private lives of total strangers. This next story comes from a former housekeeper who wishes to remain anonymous. She shared it online, and it's the story of why she quit her job on the spot. She worked at a decent, if a little run-down, hotel in a big city. Part of her job was cleaning the rooms of long-term guests. There was one guy, they only knew him as Mr. M, who'd been living in room 412 for months. He was quiet, always paid in cash, and kept to himself. Then one week, he just disappeared. He left his key on the dresser, but all his stuff was still in the room, and he never officially checked out. After a few days with no word from him, management told her to go in and clear the room out. The second she opened the door, she was hit with a wall of stale, musty air. Clothes were everywhere, and old takeout containers were piled on the desk. But there was another smell under all that. It was a foul, sickly sweet smell that got thicker the deeper she went into the room. It was a smell she'd never encountered, but her gut told her something was very, very wrong. She started cleaning, opening a window to air the place out, but the smell just seemed to get stronger. She followed her nose to the closet. Holding her breath, she pulled the door open. It was packed with a man's clothes and a few suitcases. The smell was overpowering now. It was coming from the back, from behind a row of shirts. She pushed the clothes aside and saw it. A simple, medium-sized cardboard box on the closet floor. It was taped shut, but the smell was seeping right through the seams. With a growing sense of dread, she knelt down. Maybe it was just some rotten food he'd hidden. It had to be. She used her utility key to slice the tape and open the flaps. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was the decomposing head of a young woman. For a second, her brain just refused to process what she was seeing. The image felt fake, like a prop from some horror movie. Then, reality crashed down on her. She scrambled backward, screaming, and ran out of the room, gasping for air in the hallway. The hotel was immediately crawling with police. The investigation found that Mr. M had used a fake name and a stolen credit card, making him a ghost. The victim was eventually identified as a local sex worker who'd been reported missing weeks before. The housekeeper who found her quit that same day. She said she could never unsee what was in that box and could never again walk into a hotel room without fearing what might be waiting in the shadows. Section 3. The disappearance of Ray Sutton. Our final story isn't an urban legend. It's a chilling and fact-based mystery that has been cold for nearly a century. It's the story of a man who checked into a hotel and then, for all intents and purposes, simply ceased to exist. The year was 1930, right in the middle of Prohibition in the United States. Ray Sutton was a respected and highly effective federal prohibition officer, known for taking down bootlegging rings in New Mexico and southern Colorado. In August of that year, he was working a case out of Raton, New Mexico, and staying at the Hotel Seabrook. On August 27, 1930, Agent Sutton filed his daily report, which was standard procedure. It was the last time anyone would ever hear from him. The next day, August 28th, a local deputy sheriff saw Sutton standing by his government-issued Pontiac on a road a few miles out of town. The deputy waved. Sutton waved back, and the assumption was that he was waiting to meet an informant, a normal, if dangerous part of his job. He was never seen again. When Sutton didn't check in or file his next report, his bosses got worried. A search of his room at the Hotel Seabrook found everything perfectly in order. His clothes, his personal items, even his topcoat were all there. He hadn't packed, he hadn't checked out. He had just vanished. A massive search was launched, but they found nothing. It wasn't until almost 2 months later, on October 20th, that his car was found hidden in a remote canyon. Inside, investigators found what they feared: bloodstains on the backseat carpet. The investigation eventually pointed to a suspect named Perry Caldwell, who was found in Colorado with Sutton's Masonic ID, card, and ring. He had even forged and cashed one of Sutton's government paychecks. The evidence felt like a slam dunk, but the case fell apart when a key witness, a hotel clerk who had identified Caldwell, suddenly changed his story, almost certainly out of fear of the powerful bootleggers Sutton had been targeting. Without a body and with their main witness silenced, the authorities couldn't get a murder conviction. Ray Sutton's body was never found. To this day, he remains the only federal agent from that era listed as missing in action. What happened after he waved to that deputy on the side of the road? Was he ambushed right there? Did he meet his end in that canyon or somewhere else? The answers disappeared along with him, leaving behind nothing but a bloodstain in an abandoned car and an empty room at the Hotel Seabird, a silent monument to a life that was violently erased. Conclusion: the anonymity of a hotel room is a strange thing. It offers us privacy and escape, but it can also be a place where people disappear, where awful things are done and hidden away, and where the evidence of a dark past can be concealed just under the surface. You check in, you lock the door, and you're alone with the history of that room. A history you can never really know. Thanks for watching. If these stories gave you chills, let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true horror. Stay safe out there, and maybe, just maybe, check the closet before you unpack. True horror stories from abandoned places. The sound wasn't human. It wasn't an animal. It was the noise of something wrong. A dry, scraping shuffle from the floor right above us. My friend Liam and I froze. We were crouched in the dust-choked living room of a house that was supposed to have been empty for 50 years. But we weren't alone. We'd come looking for a cheap thrill, a little adrenaline rush. We were about to get so much more than we bargained for. What happens when the silence of a forgotten place finally starts to speak? You're about to find out. There's a magnetic pull to forgotten places, isn't there? Crumbling asylums, ghost towns swallowed by the desert, decaying houses hidden deep in the woods. They're like monuments to lives that were just interrupted. Silent theaters where the final act never got performed. So why do we seek them out? For some, it's about touching history. For others, it's the simple thrill of being somewhere you know you shouldn't be. We tell ourselves we're just exploring. We tell ourselves we're safe. But the truth is, you never really know what's waiting for you inside. You never know what or who has refused to leave. Tonight, we're following the story of two friends, Liam and Josh. They thought they were just on another adventure. They were urban explorers, armed with flashlights and way too much confidence. They chose a house deep in the Georgia countryside, a place that wasn't on any maps, a place that had just been left to rot. Their experience shines a light on a terrifying reality many explorers face. Sometimes when you step into an abandoned building, you're stepping into someone else's home, and they really don't appreciate visitors. Section 1. The Allure of Decay. Liam was the history nerd. He saw entire stories in peeling paint and forgotten furniture. Josh, he was just in it for the rush and feeling of being somewhere off limits. This house was the perfect find for both of them. It was miles down a cracked, weed-choked road, totally invisible from the main highway. It stood in a clearing, a 2-story wooden structure that was slowly surrendering to nature. The porch sagged and windows were shattered, but it still had this strange sense of dignity. Good bones, as they say. Inside, the air was thick and still, heavy with the smell of damp wood and decades of dust. A fine gray powder covered everything. In the living room, an old sofa with its guts pulled out sat facing a brick fireplace. Shattered picture frames littered the floor, the glass like broken ice. It was pretty clear that whoever lived here had left in a hurry. A coffee cup was still resting on the mantelpiece. A child's worn teddy bear sat slumped in the corner of a bedroom. These weren't just ruins. They were artifacts of a life, completely frozen in time. For the first hour, it was exactly what they'd hoped for. An eerie, silent playground. And that silence was the most profound part. It was a deep, pressing quiet you only find far away from civilization. A silence that makes your own breathing feel like an intrusion. They moved through the downstairs rooms, their flashlight beams cutting through the gloom, revealing one mundane tragedy after another. A kitchen with rusted cans still on the shelves. A dining room table set for a meal that was never eaten. They documented everything with their phones, taking pictures of the decay, laughing nervously whenever a floorboard groaned under their weight. They felt that familiar mix of excitement and unease that every urban explorer knows. They felt like they were in control. The house was dead. Just wood, plaster, and memories. But buildings, especially those soaked in history, have a way of holding on to things. Echoes, energy. And as the sun began to sink below the tree line, casting long, distorted shadows through the empty windows, the house began to push back. Section 2. The House Breathes. It started so subtly, they almost missed it. Josh was filming the fireplace when Liam, standing in the hallway door, held up a hand. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Josh lowered his phone. "Hear what?" "I didn't hear anything." Just listen." They stood in absolute silence. The house was quiet, too quiet. And then it came again. A single distinct footstep from the floor above them. Heavy, deliberate. The sound of a boot on a bare wooden floor. They shot each other a look, eyes wide. Their first thought was a logical one. A squatter. Maybe another explorer. "Hello?" Josh called out, his voice sounding thin and weak in the huge space. "Anyone up there?" The only answer was that same crushing silence. The footstep didn't come again. Minutes crawled by. They started to rationalize. It was just the house settling. A branch hitting the roof. It couldn't be a person. A person would have said something. But the sound had been so clear, so undeniable. A new kind of tension filled the air. The fun was officially over. Now, there was a sharp edge of real fear. They decided they had to investigate, moving like a single unit, their backs practically touching as they crept to the main staircase. The stairs were rickety, with several steps missing entirely, making the climb feel treacherous. They called out again at the top of the landing. "We're not here to cause trouble. We'll leave." Silence. The upstairs hallway stretched before them, a corridor of pure darkness, with two closed doors on one side. Suddenly, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was that primal, hair on the back of your neck sensation, that unseen eyes are tracking your every move. It's a feeling people report all the time in places like this. A sense of being followed, of not being welcome. As they stood there, frozen, debating what to do, the first door on the left slowly, deliberately, creaked open. It moved maybe an inch, then stopped. It wasn't the wind. There was no draft. It was a clear, calculated movement. That was the moment rationalization completely failed. The terror was cold and absolute. This wasn't a dead house. It wasn't empty. Something was there with them, and it was watching them. It was playing with them. The sound they heard next is what sent them running. From behind that now slightly open door came a faint, dry whisper. It was impossible to make out words, but it was undeniably a voice, a dry, ancient sound that had no place in the world of the living. Section 3. Echoes of the past. This terrifying experience of a place seemingly holding on to the echoes of its past isn't unique to Liam and Josh. It's a phenomenon reported in abandoned sites all over the world, places stained by tragedy and intense emotion. In these locations, the past doesn't seem to be past at all. Take the ghost town of Belchite, in Spain. Once a prosperous town, it was completely destroyed during a brutal 2-week battle in the Spanish Civil War in 1937. After the war, the dictator Franco ordered it to be left in ruins, a permanent open-air museum of the conflict's horror. Today, visitors and locals report hearing things that defy any logical explanation. They hear the phantom screams of falling soldiers, the roar of battle, and most chillingly, the sorrowful cries of a child calling for his mother that are said to drift on the wind at dusk. People have even seen apparitions of women in old-fashioned clothing who simply vanish when approached. The town is so saturated with its tragic history that it seems to be replaying it on a loop for anyone who dares to listen. Or consider Grafton, Utah, a Mormon ghost town near Zion National Park that was finally abandoned by 1945 after years of hardship. Visitors to its lonely cemetery have reported hearing the disembodied sound of babies crying and have seen the ghostly figure of a woman walking among the weathered headstones. The air itself is said to be thick with whispers of the past, an undeniable feeling of some otherworldly presence that lingers among the skeletal remains of the buildings. Some believe the spirits of the original settlers, who fought so hard to build their homes against floods and famine, are simply unable to leave. These aren't just spooky stories. They are consistent experiences reported by countless people, suggesting that some places just become imprinted with the emotional energy of what happened there. What Liam and Josh were experiencing in that isolated house was likely a similar phenomenon. They had stumbled into a place where something terrible may have happened, a place that was now a container for that leftover energy. The footsteps, the whispering, the door moving on its own, it was the house replaying a fragment of its own tormented memory. The world is full of places like Belchite, Grafton, and that lonely house in the woods. These stories are a chilling reminder that we may not be alone, even when we think we are. I'm fascinated by this stuff, but I want to know about you. Have you ever had a strange or chilling encounter in an abandoned place? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you find these dives into the unknown as compelling as I do, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Conclusion: the escape and the aftermath. Back in the house, that whisper was the final straw. Pure panic took over. Liam and Josh didn't wait for a second invitation. They turned and fled, scrambling down the broken staircase with reckless desperation. They didn't dare look back. As they burst out the back door and sprinted across the overgrown yard towards the safety of their car, a single light flickered on in one of the upstairs windows, and then, just as quickly, went out. The drive back was filled with a thick, ringing silence. The adrenaline slowly wore off, replaced by a deep and unsettling dread. They didn't talk about it, not at first. How do you even begin to put words to something that shatters your sense of reality? They had gone into that house as thrill-seeking explorers and came out as unwilling witnesses to something completely inexplicable. The experience never left them. For weeks afterward, every creak of a floorboard in their own homes, every whisper of wind, sent a jolt of ice-cold fear through them. They never went urban exploring again. The allure was gone, scorched away by the memory of what they found in that house. Their story is a stark reminder. When we enter these forgotten spaces, we are intruders. We walk through rooms that were once filled with life, love, and loss. And sometimes, the emotional residue of that life remains imprinted on the very walls. So are they just wood and plaster? Or are they silent witnesses, holding on to stories that are desperate to be told? One thing is for certain: some houses aren't empty. They're just waiting